So with Bad Bunny, we were backstage at Coachella, which was like a really amazing moment just to see like the first Latino to ever headline in Coachella's 30-year history.
So dope.
And then we met up with him like I want to say like 4 days later when he was shooting the video for Where She Goes, and got to spend kind of like the day with him, kind of like on and off. Even though it was a really hectic day, he was shooting like in the desert. There was like desert storms, and he was like out there like trying to like look cool for this video, and it was just a really really intense. He was like battling the elements.
Oh my gracious.
Even back in high school, Jennifer inspired more than
Cambié la imagen por vender bitcoins.
Come on, shake your body, baby, do that conga.
What's going on? Welcome to Growing Up Latina. I am your host, Alyi V, and today I have senior music editor at Rolling Stone, Julyssa Lopez.
Hi, thank you for having me.
No, my phone is not ringing before. Like, what is this?
There's so many obstacles, right? Like, I got sick, the cameras aren't rolling, the phone.
I know. Before we started talking, the cameras weren't rolling. Then you got sick, and I'm like, oh my God. So many things.
We're going to make it happen.
Welcome.
We're going to make it happen. Thank you
How
so
are
much.
you? How are you feeling today?
I'm good. I'm feeling better.
Okay, good. So let's get into it. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, so Julyssa, if you took the full body of work that you've produced for the last 10 years,
Ooh.
and then the work that you're going to produce in the next 10 years, and you had to summarize that work and the mission and why you do it, what would you say? And why it matters, more importantly.
Yeah. I think for me, I've been wanting to be a journalist since I was like a little kid. I've been writing since I was 15 years old. I always wanted to write feature stories and magazine stories. And I feel like as I've kind of gone through this career, what became really important to me was to include my own culture into that. So I think if we're talking about like what I've done in the past and what I want to do in the future, I think I want to continue to tell stories, especially ones that kind of portray the realities of what it's like to be Latino and what it means to be Latino in so many different ways. I don't know that means that every story has to be a positive story. I think I want my work to be complex and to kind of shed light on like how, all the different facets of this experience, and to keep finding ways to get Latinos in the pages of magazines and the pages of newspapers as much as I can.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Washington, D.C. Yeah.
Nice.
And my family, my family is originally from Nicaragua. They came here in the 80s. They were undocumented for a while. And I have a really big family as well. So like my whole family was kind of in the DMV area. Then we moved to Silver Spring, which is just outside of D.C. And like our whole family was there. Like my mom is one of 9 kids. My dad is one of 13.
Oh, you
so
have
like
a big family.
It's a big family. I have like 50 cousins, and like they were all sort of like in the area. So.
And you have brothers and sisters, and
I'm one of 5. I'm the middle of 5. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So Thanksgiving, what was that like?
Oh my gosh.
What was that like?
So un relajo. No, but that's the crazy thing. Like, yeah, like holidays, not even holidays, but like every weekend we would spend like at my grandmother's house and, with my grandfather. And I feel like my family, like, because, I can only imagine like the difficulty, right, of like, coming here and not speaking the language and having to like, find your way kind of. And so the people that they relied on were family. So like I really grew up with that. Like we weren't like close to our neighbors. Like we didn't really like my family didn't really have like friends, around town. Like the people that we hung out with were family members. And, like, the people like my friends, I always felt like were like my cousins. And
I always say that too.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because my cousin, I always say, you're my cousin, but you're also my friend. Because your family, like, for us, it's like they are your friends. Those are the people that you
Yeah.
hang out with. Those are like the people that you do everything with. You go out to the club with your cousins. You know what I mean?
My first club experiences were with my cousins.
Yeah.
And like, and so, but you grow up with that, right? Of like,
Yeah.
I think it is a little bit different than, somebody who maybe has like, a smaller family who kind of has to like create, and like find bonds with people and around them. But like with us, it was like, well, everybody's here already.
Yeah.
So you better like,
Yeah.
connect. So
What are some of the memories that you remember, particularly from La Sala? Like the Sala memories. Like, what was that like? What was the vibe? What kind of music were you guys listening to? What were the novelas you had?
Oh my goodness, the novelas. Definitely like a big novela family. Also like a big like news family. Like Primer Impacto, I felt like was always on. I feel like we were always like, I actually don't have a TV now because like I'm a little bit scarred just because it was always on in La Sala.
I'm the same way.
And I'm like, now I kind of need it to be quiet.
Like you appreciate silence.
Exactly.
I know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of an introvert too, so I'm always like, if it's too noisy, I'm like, ugh.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, we just had a really, really big family. And I think in my immediate family, I had, I'm really, really close to both of my parents, and so much of I feel like what I do is because I recognize kind of the journey that they were on and like the sacrifices that they made. And when we did have the sala time, a lot of times it was like my dad would be my dad worked like construction and handyman services. My mom cleaned houses for a lot of my childhood. So like those are really physical jobs. It's like a lot of physical labor. So when you go to la sala, like that's your time to relax and to chill and to like, let the body rest. And so it was like a lot of telenovelas.
Mine was La Usurpadora.
La Usurpadora, I was just about to say that.
That was my novela.
We were obsessed
Maria
with that
del
one.
Barrio,
Maria
like,
del Barrio, Marimar. The crazy thing is I interviewed Talia recently, and it was like such like a mind-blowing thing to be like, you were in my living room. Like you were, like this like really important part of like these like day-to-day routines that you have like with your family and as a kid. And then in terms of the music, like my dad is like a big like rock head. Like he loved like American rock, and he jokes a lot that that's like how he learned English. Porque like con la música, like he would like kind of like learn the words a little bit and maybe mess it up here and there. But they also like listen to like a lot of like my grandfather listened to like a lot of like old boleros. He loved like Alfredo Sadel and like a lot of sort of more of the classics. And then like at the family parties, it was always like a lot of, I don't know, Nicaraguans listen to a lot of salsa, like a lot of merengue, Carlos Vives, kind of like all the mainstream stuff.
And where did you fall in line? Like what did you gravitate more towards? Was it like what genre of music did you?
I feel like to me, what was interesting, and I feel like when you grow up in the U.S., like to me, my family felt like very, very Nicaraguan still. And again, it's I think because of a lot of that. Like I think when they first came here, they didn't speak the language. Their friends were their family. Like they built this little Nicaraguan nucleus right where they were. So I think when you're like a teenager and stuff, like you kind of like want to gravitate toward other stuff. I listened to like a lot of like rock and indie music. My brothers were super into hip hop, and like a lot of American music. But for me, like anytime I felt like I would go back and like listen to the music that I grew up with, like it felt like mine. And I think especially when you're navigating two cultures and like, when you're at school and you feel like you don't like fit in and everybody around you is like, like you're like the only Latina in there. I feel like you gravitate back to those things that like maybe you rejected at one point because they feel like home and like they feel like familiar to you. So I would say that it was always like that mix, right? Of like, trying to like figure out and navigate the American stuff because it didn't feel like my family was very Americanized, and I felt like I kind of had to figure it out. Yeah. But then like for comfort, going back to the music that we listened to like as a family. And then I think as I got older, like what became interesting is that I kind of found I kind of wanted to like merge the two. Like I was like, okay, so like I'm discovering this like weird indie music and indie rock in the American world. And I remember I went to a concert when I was like 15 years old, and I saw this the singer from Argentina named Juana Molina, who's like super weird and experimental, and
Yeah.
you know, she does like a lot of like almost like, you know, like performance art kind of. And I was like, okay, I was like, so like this does exist in the
Right.
Latino world. Like how do I find more of this? And then that's also kind of, I think, where I became interested in sort of that discovery piece of like figuring out what else is
At 15.
happening. Yeah.
Wow, that's really good.
And because DC has like a lot of like clubs and stuff where like you
Yeah.
can go to like free shows or like underage shows.
What was school like for you? Like, what was that environment? What did it feel like?
Yeah.
Did you have a lot of friends in school? Like, what was that
Yeah,
dynamic?
I went to a really big high school. My
Okay.
graduating class was like 700 people.
What?
Yeah, and that was just like my like the grade. Again, like I think, you know, I think I did have a lot of friends. I had a lot of the people that I hung out with in high school were like all Latinas. Like we all like kind of like gravitated toward each other and like found like our little group.
Yeah.
But I think too, you know, one thing for me that was really challenging about high school was that I think because my family, you know, had come here, I think they had like struggled to get here. They were undocumented for a while. They almost grew up with this like crazy fear of like everything, you know, like they wouldn't let me
Yeah.
do anything.
Oh yeah.
So I had
Sounds
like
like
a
my
super,
childhood.
yeah, but
Yes.
I was like super sheltered, like,
Yeah.
so like maybe I don't know, like
Like you
I
couldn't
always,
have your friends sleeping
exact.
over.
Oh my God,
You couldn't
sleepovers?
sleep
Are you
over.
crazy?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
no sleepovers. And you know, in high school too, and I think especially like American high schools, like the like high school parties and
Yeah.
like, you know, like homecoming and
Did you go to
proms.
prom?
I did go to prom.
Okay. Okay,
With
so
like
that's good.
friends though, so it was
Okay.
like very like como todo tapado, like.
Yeah. Did you go to like senior trips or anything?
No,
Yeah,
no,
me
I wasn't
either.
allowed to go to beach week. I didn't do,
Yeah,
do
I
any
didn't
of
do
that. My
that
parents
either.
were so strict. But I don't know. Do you think about that? Like, because like you're like maybe like I would have been like more outgoing, or maybe, you know, it would have been different if like I had been allowed to do those things. But
You know what? I feel like what would have been different for me, and I'm grateful that I had this experience growing up. We didn't have phones. I think if I would have had a phone back
Definitely.
then, oh, I feel like I would have been disconnected
yeah,
from my family. I wouldn't identify any roots or just any culture, you
Yeah.
know?
yeah,
So I think that would have been the only difference for me.
yeah,
Because the TV is fine when you're growing up and it's like, you know, that's a family thing. But if you have a phone and
All-
social
yeah.
media,
You're just like,
because it's like at that point, it's like, okay, mommy, you don't want to let me go out. Cool. But I'm going to be on social media.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like, I think that's the only thing that I'm really grateful that we didn't have phones. I mean, we had
Yeah.
phones, but we didn't have cell phones.
we didn't have. Yeah, I feel like
Yeah.
I had like a Nokia, like one of the brick
Yeah.
phones at some point.
Yeah.
when I was a teenager, but it wasn't the same. I mean, it's not the same.
Yeah.
I don't feel like social media had like touched down the same way.
No. I remember when I had AOL dial up. I remember when I would speak to my friends on the phone, my mom would literally be listening on the other line. I'm like, Mom. She's like, Alexandra. I'm like, yo, really? Like, this is so disrespectful. So those are like some of the memories that I remember when I was, you know, kind of discovering you and doing my research. Like I told you, I only do research up until a certain point. I wonder if me interviewing her would feel weird.
Mhm.
Because you're on my side.
Oh my God.
All the obstacles.
Oh my God. Oh my God. More obstacles. My dad calling me. He's like, I
Oh
felt
my God.
he's like, he probably felt his ear. Like,
Yeah, it was ringing. But I'm like, does it feel weird to you, like someone interviewing you?
Yes.
It does.
Yes.
It does.
Yeah. I feel like so much, I don't know, like, again, like I was saying, like I'm a pretty introverted person. I'm pretty shy. And that makes like sometimes the job challenging because like I
Yeah.
feel like you're thrown into situations where like you have to like open up and like be like extroverted and like
Yeah.
throw yourself out there. But it is easy in that like I think I'm like more of an observer and like I like asking questions, and then when people turn around on me, I'm always like, so it
Yeah.
is. But
Did you know that well, let's really take it back. What was your first job?
my very, very first
Yeah,
job,
what was that?
I started working, I think, when I was like 14 or 15 at a coffee shop. at a sandwich shop called Everyday Gourmet, making like coffee for people. And then when I was a little bit older, a guy who my mom cleaned houses for gave me like an internship at a law firm to like save money like before college.
Okay.
So I was like filing papers and stuff. And like the whole time that I was there, I remember like my parents were like, like they were like using that as like, do you want to be a lawyer?
Yeah.
But like I
And
think
you're
I
like,
knew I was like locked in. Like I knew
Yeah.
I knew that I wanted to be a writer. Like from the time, like I said, that like I was like, you know, I took my first journalism class in high school, and I was like,
Did you have
sold.
journals growing up? Did you have like a diary? Did you
I have
have?
always had diaries. I've always kept diaries. I think the only thing that's like a little bit different in my experience was so many, you know, once I kind of started going down this route of like, okay, I want to be a journalist, I want to do this. I felt like everybody else that wanted to be a journalist, first of all, like it felt like they were all white, and it felt like they had all grown up. Like I remember like one girl in my high school, her dad was a really, really big, like famous writer for the Washington Post. And if they were like, you know, we get like 7 newspapers delivered to our house every day and we read them every morning. That was like non-existent at my
Right.
house. Like, you know, my parents didn't really like read in English. Like we watched, like I was saying, Primer Impacto.
Yeah.
And I remember almost having like that question of like, oh, like, can I do this? Like, I didn't grow up this way. Like, I don't have the same understanding of journalism in the same way. Like, I didn't grow up reading, you know, like all of these like columnists and like writers
Well-
that they were talking about weren't my references.
But that's what I was going to ask you. Like, first of all, the word journalism. Where did you first hear that word? Like, how did you know that this is what I want to do and this is what it's
Yeah.
called?
I always loved reading, and like for a long time I thought I wanted to write fiction, but then I took a class in high school, and they were like, you know, this whole job is like you get to go to people and like ask them about their experiences and like
Yeah.
be able to like write, you know. And I think the writing part for me was always is still the most important part of like trying to figure out like creative ways to share that story and to amplify whatever message that they have. But I think for a long time I was just like too scared. I was like, I don't think that I can
Really?
do that. Like I didn't know any.
You didn't see it.
I didn't see
Yeah.
it. Like I didn't see it.
You
I
didn't see
didn't,
it.
you know, it's not, my parents like didn't like know any journalists. They weren't journalists, and it
Right.
seemed like something so like I don't know, it almost seemed like you had to be in that world if you wanted to be a part of it. And so I think for a long time, like I kind of like
Shied away.
como que lo soñaba, but then I would like let
Yeah.
it go, and then like it was like that like dream that almost felt like too big of like, oh no, like I don't know if I can do this. And then
So how do you get into that world?
yeah,
How'd you get into it?
I kind of kept going, you know. In college I was like on like, you know, the college newspaper, and then I feel like the sort of the breakthrough, I got an internship at Washingtonian magazine, which is like the like sort of the big regional magazine in DC.
But wait, was it that you like how do you even get there? How do you get an internship there? Did you like bump into someone? Did you
No,
ask? Was there
I
an
applied
ad?
cold. I applied
Okay,
cold. They had like
okay.
they did like a fellowship every year. I think they still do it. And it's a good internship if anybody out there is like, it's paid. It's not, doesn't pay a lot, but it pays.
It's a good way to get your foot in the door for sure.
And I didn't think that I was gonna get it again, because I was like, you know, I had, it was my first internship. All I really had done was like up until that point like school newspapers.
Right.
And I remember like I had a phone call with one of the editors, and I remember I was like so scared that I like started babbling, and like in my babbling I found myself like pitching stories and being like, I think we should do this, and I think we should do this, and like in that she was like, oh, okay, like I think she's somebody that like might have good ideas, and like she doesn't have a lot of experience, but like let's try her.
Yeah.
And so I think, you know, that was like my first sort of experience with like magazine journalism, especially, which then I decided pretty quickly that like within the world of journalism, that's what I was most interested in. And then when I was there, I kept pitching music stories because like,
Well, that's
it's
what I was going to
love.
ask. What was it about music in particular that you loved writing about? Like,
I just kept going there. And I remember I had an editor at one point that was like, you know, you should really think about like something, you know, maybe more serious. Maybe you should try like immigration or something. and I remember I took that and I was like, oh my gosh, does this mean that like music journalism like isn't like as serious? What is
Right.
what is that? And again, like it went back to like that's what I was doing like when I was 15. I was going to
Right.
shows. This is the music that we were listening to in La Sala. I felt like there was this connective tissue with music that like just subconsciously I just kept reverting back to it and being like, I think we should write about this musician. I think we should write about this like concert that's coming up.
So you always pitched the ideas and then wrote about it.
And then it ended up just kind of being like what I had, and I kept going back to it, even when I was like kind of considering like should I be another kind of journalist. But I think what I've learned now, I think that feedback of like you should do something more serious, like I think writing about music and culture is like extremely serious, and like
Absolutely.
I think like this is such a incredible lens to like explore something that is a different, you know, it gives you a lens into culture, it gives you a lens into like politics, it gives you a lens into social issues. It's both like a reflection of what's happening in the world, it reflects back what's happening in the world at the same time, and it's like how people live and like that.
Right.
What more important, you know, medium or thing to talk about? Like this is like literally the thing that like unites people and divides people and brings them together. So why not focus on that?
And how do you, when you write these stories, what is not necessarily your angle, because every angle is different for every artist, but like, what is the fascination behind the story? What are you trying to, I guess, depict from whatever the music is? Because music is a very layered thing, you know what I mean? So what is it that you're trying to bring out in order to, I guess, distribute to the world?
Yeah. I think it depends on like who we're talking about, but like I think trying to really understand, you know, if it's an artist, like I think like sometimes what the fascination is and like why they're important and why they matter in our culture and what they mean to people. And I think sometimes like that answer is really complex because somebody can mean many, many different things to lots of different people. I like to pretend sometimes like, you know, like if I'm writing, I'm like, if like aliens like were to come into the world and this is the one thing that they would read about this person, like I want to paint like an honest portrait of what that person was in that time and like capture them like as best as I can. And so that means like writing about like the controversies that they were involved in, writing about, you know, the amazing things that they accomplished, and like really, really trying to like understand like why this person matters to us. And a lot of times because I am writing about Latinos and música latina, a lot of times I think that says so much about our culture too, like in terms of who we're gravitating to, like why someone is important, why someone means something to us. And then, you know, if it's not like specific to an artist, if it's like a genre of music, or if it's writing about like a song or a trend, I think also just trying to understand it on those different levels that we talked about. Like, what does it mean politically? What does it mean socially? What does it mean, you know, like at a pop culture level?
Yeah. You know, what I find interesting, and we're going to go back to your job, we're going to talk about that in a little bit, but what I find interesting is the whole idea of the Latin explosion, right? Like, we had it in the past, and that's when like Ricky Martin, Mark Anthony, J-Lo, Enrique, like everybody was out, but they all made English albums. They all crossed over to the English side. Now the Latin explosion that we're having today, that we're seeing and we're witnessing, is people showing up as themselves. Toquisha, you see Rosalia, like they're not singing in English. They're showing up in Spanish. Bad Bunny, like Bad Bunny is not rapping in English. He is globally the #1 artist, and he's showing up as himself at all times. And I feel like that is the difference. But I wonder for you, as someone that's writing about it and also covering these stories, because you have covered Bad Bunny, Rosalia, you know, I wonder for you, what is your take on what we're now witnessing with, I guess, like the second wave of a Latin explosion?
Yeah, I think for me, one thing that I always try to remember is like, I do think that we tend to talk about Latin music sort of like in these like boom and bust, like this is the boom right now, this is a boom. I think it's also important to recognize like this music is like always been popular. Like it's always been lit. It's always been part of, you know, what the fabric of American music. Like even if you go way back in the day and we talk about like how much, you know, there was this like amazing, you know, fusion of Latin sounds like in New York, like when, you know, salsa musicians and like jazz musicians and everybody were playing together. Like this music has always been here, and we've always had these icons that I think are a really, really important part of what we think of an American mainstream. I do think like one amazing thing is that like now, you know, people don't feel that need to cross over in the same way anymore. Like they don't feel the need to go back and make, I don't know, an album in English or to like really like learn English. If we talk about Shakira, like Shakira had like an amazing global career in Spanish and like was known all over Latin America. And then when she got here, like she really like focused on, you know, learning English, and like she was gonna, you know, make this big crossover. I think so much of that is also pressure from the industry. Like I think that the people that she was working with, like that was what they saw as like the path forward. They were like, this is what you have to do to get to that level. And I think that somewhere along the line, like someone needed to challenge that and be like, maybe that's not what you have to do.
Yeah.
Maybe you can still do it, like not, you know, changing
still
who
be
you
mainstream.
are. And I wonder like what would have happened like if like they had that belief back then, and like, you know, Shakira hadn't made songs in English, or Ricky didn't, you know, like had, you know, just decided just to be an artist in Spanish. Like I wonder if it was just like that like industry pressure of like thinking that you had to do that. And I mean, it's worked out great for them. They've had amazing, amazing global careers, but I think it also like, at the very least, maybe like inserted the question of like, is this the only way that like you can be big and you have to cross over? And so I think now what we're seeing with Bad Bunny and you know, Maluma or any of these artists that are refusing to sing in English is that like actually you don't have to. And I think one big thing that helped too is that like we just have so many more ways of measuring success now. Like we can measure streaming numbers, we can measure like views on YouTube to really prove that like actually you can be successful just by doing the same thing, and you don't need to cater to an Anglo audience. Like there's plenty of people around the globe. Like there's so many Latinos out there who are listening to this. And then I think that like that same popularity is like caught on where like Bad Bunny says, like ahora like todo el mundo quiere ser Latino. Like everybody is like now like catching on and like recognizing that this is like a global phenomenon and interested in it.
Do you think he would ever, like, since we're speaking about Bad Bunny, do you think he would ever have to make an English album?
I don't think he would have to. I think he might choose to. Who knows? We saw the Where She Goes had the title in English, but I do think at the very least, like what this generation of artists has done is kind of at least like put that blueprint forth that like you don't have to if you don't want to. Like maybe you can change your mind down the line, and like if you're feeling it, you can do it, but it's not necessary to become a major global star. Like now in the textbooks, like there's going to be a chapter that's like actually like you can, you know, make the music in Spanish. Like you don't have to, like, whereas before it was like so much focusing on the previous generation in the early 2000s of like how they crossed over, and now it's like, oh, actually there's another way to do it.
Even the language, I feel like, because we saw it in Selena, right? Like she had to learn Spanish, and it was like a big thing. Like you must learn Spanish or you will never be accepted. What are your thoughts on Latinos who are Latinos, but they don't speak Spanish? They don't speak the language.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many ways of being Latino. Like it's such a complex identity, and like I don't think that like necessarily it's the language that gives you, you know, an entryway into your culture.
Right.
I think that like, you know, there's so many different ways of being Latino. There's not just one prescriptive thing that like makes you a Latino or not. I also think a lot about, you know, the reasons that maybe some people don't speak Spanish. It's like maybe their parents like, you know, really like, I think there's some families where like it's like really important to like, you know, try to assimilate, and then they like don't want their kids to be bullied, and like there's such like I think a stigma sometimes around speaking Spanish in this country that's really awful and unfortunate. And I think parents do like whatever they can to like try to learn, and you know, there's different reasons for it, but it's not at all like it doesn't really make who you are.
Yeah, and I also feel like too, like music, it's its own language. Like I'm like, music is a language.
Yeah.
You know, like to me, music is it's not Spanish, it's not English, it's just a feeling for me.
Exactly.
Let's get into your Rolling Stone. How did you? Because that's what we really want to know. How did you get into that? How was that?
Yeah. So I again, I think because we were talking about, because I kind of like questioned, like, should I be a journalist? Should I not? Da, da, da. I was like on this, like, que no sé. I did like different things, you know, like out of college, and like once I started working, like I worked in like email marketing, and I was always freelancing on the side. Like I was always like writing at night and like kind of like holding on to that like little sliver of the dream of like, you know, maybe one day.
Yeah.
And then I feel like a lot of it changed. This writer,
The obstacles. No, I'm just joking. Go ahead.
At the Washington Post, Chris Richards asked me, I was writing still at the time, and I had like all these clips, and he was like, do you want to cover sort of like the Latin music circuit? Like, do you want to go to shows at night and like write about them for the Washington Post? And I was like so scared. I was like, okay, I'll try. And I wrote like my first piece on spec, which basically means like you write it and they either publish it or they don't. And it's like sink or swim. They're like, either this is good or this is bad.
Right.
And so it got in the paper. And
I was like literally on the, I'm like, so what happened? I'm like,
no,
did they scrap it?
They were super, super nice about it. They were like super encouraging.
Okay.
The editor over there, David Mallitz, who's also someone who like really, really supported my career. So I was always freelancing, right? After that, I was like, okay. I was like, I've written for the Washington Post. I was like going to shows like every week and pitching stuff all the time. And then I did a grad school program that got me to Germany, to Berlin.
Wow.
And when I was in Germany, I was in Berlin, I started freelancing even more because I was like, now I have like the time. Berlin is much more affordable than DC or New York, so you can like, you know, kind of afford to like, you can just make a living much more as a freelancer.
Right.
And so I think while I was there is when I started freelancing for Rolling Stone. I think I did like my first piece was like on like the Latin Grammys in like 2020 or something. I don't remember exactly when. And I also just want to say that Rolling Stone did feel like I had written for all these places, and again, like I always get like intimidated before, you know. But with Rolling Stone, like I did feel like there was like a sort of like a big guiding light there, and that was Susie Exposito, who she had been the sort of the first Latin editor there, and she was writing about Latino music, and she's the first Latina to ever write a Rolling Stone cover story, and I just like thought that she was like such a badass. And so when the position opened up at Rolling Stone, like I had already been freelancing. I had already kind of like had a little bit of a foot in. Right. And I started there as a writer and then got promoted about 9 months into an editor.
How does that feel?
Feels good.
And,
feels
and also, like, what
but...
does it look? No, what does it look like? Like, is there a lot of us there?
No. I think there's been more recently.
Okay.
I'm the only female music editor there right now. Everybody else is a dude. And I'm the only Latina editor at the magazine. We've hired like there's some writers now. There's a couple like videographers. So it's growing, and I think it's grown more in the last year. But I do think the thing about Rolling Stone, you know, it's a rock magazine. It started in 1967 with like the intention of covering rock music with the same vigor and seriousness that you would cover politics. And so I think rock has traditionally been a very white genre, and so that's reflective of the people that have worked there over the years. Right. I think it's not until recently, and I think Susie's a big part of that, like the path that she opened up, that they've really started to change sort of their attitude around, you know, Latin music and covering more global music. And so I really see my role as like taking that even further and being like, how can we do this in the best way? How can we get, you know, more people both in the magazine and also like writing for us?
Like, how do you expand? Like, what does expansion look like for you in your role? What does that look like? And how do you feel like you will open doors for others to come in?
I think for me, the biggest thing is like getting more writers and more Latinas that can tell different kinds of stories. Because like I said, like the beautiful thing and the complicated thing about this is that there's no like one way to tell a Latino story. There's no like one story that's like, this is the story of Latin music and this is like the genre we should be covering and the type of artist we should be covering. We're talking about, first of all, even Latin music itself, like that term is like such a difficult construct because you're talking about like, hundreds of genres from like dozens of countries, and you can't pigeonhole it into one thing. So it's like, how do we cast a wider net and really capture like what's happening both in the US and the diaspora in Latin America and tell those stories in the best way possible? I really think that telling them the best way possible is to get diverse writers, and that means diverse not just like she checks the Latina box, but like also a diverse group of Latino writers. And we've had, I think for me it's really, really important that we're also including a lot of stories about Black Latinos and Afro Latinas. And we've had, like Catalina Eccleston, Reggaeton con la Gata, who's written some incredible pieces for us. Jenny Mota, who covers Dominican culture and has written, some fantastic pieces for us. So like to keep like pushing that and to keep, bringing more people into the fold, because that's ultimately the only way to do it, I think.
Yeah. How do you know what story to cover? Like, how do you know who you want to target?
Yeah.
What does that look like behind the scenes for you?
Yeah. I think a lot of times it's, I think it works in two different sort of levels. I think we're covering people kind of at the mainstream level, and I think that's what Rolling Stone has traditionally been really good at. I think Rolling Stone gives you access to sort of the biggest stars of the moment, and that's what it's always done. Sort of in the old days, like it was like John Lennon was on the cover and they were at John Lennon's house for days, or Tina Turner, and they were, covering like behind the scenes of her life. So I think that like sort of the mainstream stars are always going to be part of, the story that we're telling. But I think for me too, it's like behind the scenes, it's also like paying attention to who's coming up and like to really having like an eye on like who's going to blow up next, and like making sure that like we're kind of in the mix like as those stories are happening. And so it could be like doing like a short piece on somebody, like an artist you need to know feature on someone that we think is going to make it big. I'm thinking right now of this Dominican rapper named J Noah. I don't know if
my
you know
God,
her.
I love J Noah.
She's crazy.
Are
She's
you
17
kidding
years
me?
old.
I
like,
love J Noah.
She's crazy. She's like
my
amazing.
God.
But like, again, like I think like traditionally at Rolling Stone, like they're like, oh, well, she's not Bad Bunny. She's not Karol G. Like we shouldn't, we're not ready to cover her. But I think if you stick, if you start telling that story from the beginning and then follow the career path and like follow like the star that that she's gonna be, I think that just like, tells like a more honest story, and like also makes Rolling Stone reflect like what's really happening like on, the scene in different countries.
Take me through like a day-to-day at the job. Like if you're covering, for instance, when you covered Bad Bunny, like what is that like? How many days are you with him? Are you just allowed to ask him whatever? Like, what does that look and feel like? What is that?
Yeah. The Bad Bunny cover. So Bad Bunny was just our cover star for the July-August issue. And that was a big moment, because it felt like nice to be able to like, Susie had the first, she'd been the first Latina to write a cover story with Bad Bunny in, I think 2020. And that was like, it's still to this day, like probably my favorite Rolling Stone cover ever, probably one of my favorite stories ever. So to feel like 3 years later, like they still felt like we need to cover Bad Bunny, to me spoke so much about where his career has gone, where like Latin music in general has gone. Because like, the people that we talk about like putting, on a cover again, like that's always like it has to be someone like really big. It's always like Taylor Swift or like someone like at that level. And so the fact that like now Bad Bunny is like on that same scale of like this is the conversation that we're having. We do, we talk to their publicist beforehand just to make sure that like there's no other magazine coming out before or after, just to kind of see like where they are in their career and what's going on. And that one was also really special because I got to be there right when he was playing Coachella. So
Oh, dope.
we negotiated a bunch of time with their team of, in general, Rolling Stone covers, like, I think the thing that makes them so hard is that, like, you really have to, like, negotiate, like, no, we're gonna spend time with this artist. Like, it isn't just like a 1 hour dinner and then like you're done. Like
Right.
we plan like several days and several activities to like really be able to get behind the scenes and get to be able to tell the story of where they're at in their career at that particular moment. So with Bad Bunny, we were backstage at Coachella, which was like a really amazing moment just to see like the first Latino to ever headline in Coachella's 30-year history.
So dope.
And then we met up with him like I want to say like 4 days later when he was shooting the video for Where She Goes, and got to spend kind of like the day with him, kind of like on and off. Even though it was a really hectic day, he was shooting like in the desert. There was like desert storms, and he was like out there like trying to like look cool for this video, and it was just a really really intense. He was like battling the elements. And
But do you
then-
just observe him? Are you asking questions?
Yeah, so
Are
it's a little bit of both. Like
Okay.
and I think different people approach it a little bit differently. My way is to really like do like a lot of like observation, but in between, I think that when we did Where She Goes, we probably talked like a total of like maybe like 2.5 to 3 hours, kind of broken up in between. And but I think it also gives you so much context about a person too, to kind of like watch like who they keep in their circle, to
Right.
like talk a little bit. Like I remember I got like one really good anecdote about him from like because we had to drive really far to shoot in the desert for this. There was one of his drivers that like took me to the site, and I remember I was like talking to the driver and like trying to get stories, and, like trying to like hear a little bit, like
Yeah.
and I feel like that stuff helps you so much. Just so it's a little bit of both. For me, the interview part is always the most intimidating because, like I said, I'm shy, and so I'm always like,
How are you shy? Yeah. No, but that's
But-
dope.
yeah,
Like
but
you're like a part of history at that moment, you
thank
know?
you.
No, it's the
Thank
truth.
you.
Like you cover that story. That's history.
and I think like
Like, do you ever look at it like that? Like, what do you ever look
Yeah.
at your life and say, wow, this is a major moment for me?
I don't feel like I feel like I look at it and I'm like, I can't believe that happened. Like I'm always like like surprised by the things that happen, because it's like things that like I didn't really like. I was like saying, like I was like almost too scared to like dream them, or to like really be like, this is what I'm gonna do.
Yeah.
But I think it really dawns on me and makes me feel like I'm accomplishing something too when I talk to like younger journalists, and they're like, oh my gosh, like I like want to like be doing this at some point. Like I feel like I can do it now. And that's when you're like, okay, this is like, it's like worth the headaches. It's worth
Yeah.
like the fights for everything, because like I said, so much of why I was nervous about doing this and having this career was because I didn't know any Latina journalists. I didn't see anybody until very, very late in my 20s. And I think now that like if there's like younger people who want to do this, I'm
And
like
now they see
all
you
for it. And I'm like, you
they're
should
like,
do it. Like you can do it. There's literally like no reason why you can't.
well, what are some of the steps that they should take if they want to be, maybe a Julyssa Lopez one day, like what would you recommend? What's some of the advice that you would give them?
I think media is a really tough industry right now. And I think I try to be honest about that without dissuading anybody, because I also remember that there were a lot of people when I was like, talking about journalism. I remember I talked to this one guy who was like a reporter for the AP, and he was like, you should really be a nurse. Like journalism is in
No
the
way.
toilet. Don't do it. And I think about that all the time. I'm like, what if I had listened to that and like had gone and done
Thank
something
God.
else? And like,
Thank God you didn't listen. Thank God.
So I think too, like if it's something that you really want to do, like don't let other people tell you that you can't, or don't get like scared by like, the what might happen. Like just try it and keep going for it. And I think also just really understanding like there is so much power in your experiences and your culture and your background that always is gonna make you a better storyteller. Like if you are somebody who you're a Latino and you have like a connection to your community, you're gonna have that connection better than a white journalist who's trying to do this same thing.
That's
and
right.
I see that so many times where like I see people who have like great, incredible ideas, but like they're too scared because they're like, I don't know if I'm like ready. And I'm like, if you knew like the amount of like gringos who like really don't know what they're talking about, who like are like out there and are like pitching and are writing like they know, like you know this better than anyone. Like you know your culture better than anyone.
I
and
always
you're
say
in the
you need
best
to have the
place.
audacity.
Exactly.
Have the audacity.
Exactly. I always tell girls too, like, because I find sometimes like some of the women journalists I talk to, like, they get nervous. I'm like, pitch like you're a mediocre white guy. Like, get out there and like
And
pitch
just-
like you know everything. And like, even like if you don't believe it, and like for a long time, like I didn't believe it either, but I was like still trying. And
But there is a confidence in you. Like, as we're speaking, I'm like, even though there was that little voice in your head that said, no, don't do it. There's something inside where you did believe in yourself.
Yeah.
I do feel like you were very confident in your ability to write and the story that you wanted to put out there. So I wonder, where does that come from? Like that confidence of like, I'm going to do it anyway, regardless, scared, nah, it doesn't matter. Because you didn't stop. You could have stopped.
I could have stopped.
Yeah, you could have stopped.
And I thought about stopping so many times.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it too is like that drive that comes from like seeing like other people in your family who like struggled to like get you to places, and it kind of makes you like almost like slap yourself a little bit and be like, okay, but like why am I so scared? Like they've like made these like giant sacrifices to like come to this country to like fight and struggle here and to have like lives that sometimes are really, really challenging. And for what? So that I can shrink into myself and not be brave and not try. And I think for me that was something that like, you know, it's been so important for me to like honor my parents' journey, honor like everything that they did to get here, and to like keep trying even when I'm scared. And like, you know, like I wish I was one of those people who was like, you know, had like that natural like boldness and like didn't
me too.
but I don't. But I think, you know, but you keep trying, I think sometimes, because like you recognize that like there's people, you know, who made huge sacrifices and believe in you, and like you want something to come from all of that.
How has motherhood changed you?
Ooh, it's been, honestly, it's been like the best. Like I love being a mom. And to be like 100% honest, I was really, really ambivalent about being a mom. I was really nervous about it. I was really apprehensive. I didn't know if I wanted to be a mom. And I think the biggest thing now is just like, you feel so divided with your time. Like you want to do amazing work and like have, you know, this career and accomplish all these things. And then you want to spend all your time with your baby.
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
So
It's like that boundary that you need to set, right?
Exactly. But I do feel like it's like another, I feel like it comes in more, I think, for me on like the writer side. Like I do feel like motherhood has just made me think in a different way. Like there's almost something about it that like when you're like kind of seeing the world again through your child's eyes, it reminds you of things that like maybe you haven't thought about in a while. It like reframes I think the way that you see the world, and I think makes you creative in a different way. Like it makes you tap into things that like you kind of forgot about sometimes to like be around little kids.
Yeah.
So I think it's been incredible. My 2-year-old is like the cutest, and he's also super into music, which I've been
I was just about to ask that. Like, are you seeing any signs of like?
I'll show you videos after this, but like he's obsessed with guitars, and I play guitar terribly. I'm like the worst guitar player ever, but I like
So
play
where is
it
he
for
getting
him.
this
So
from?
I don't know. Like he's just like gravitated. We've always had like guitars in my house, and
But he just picked it up and said, "Okay."
picks it up. He sings. He'll sing you Baba Black Sheep on one string.
Nice.
And he's really, really interested in music. And I think too, like that's almost like, it can be so hard, I think, in this industry, because you're going in and day out, and like sometimes you feel like crushed by the volume and by the pressure of it and how much there is. And then there's something, I think, like when you see like the music your kid is connecting to that like makes it kind of like new and innocent again. So I think that part of motherhood has been really, really helpful.
What do you think is the most, I guess, valuable lesson that he has taught you?
I think that to like kind of like see the world and like have that sort of I don't know, to kind of snap my fingers and like have like a sense of like newness again.
Yeah.
Because like he's experiencing it for the world for the first time. And so I think it can be so easy to just kind of like, I don't know, feel like a little bit jaded sometimes. Like you're like, okay, I've been doing this a while now. Like I know everything.
Yeah.
And then when you're with a 2-year-old, you're like actually like
He's excited.
he's
and
excited
like,
and it's
yeah,
contagious,
the
right?
way
You
he's
feel
like
that way
processing
too.
the music is different.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love
Exactly.
that.
Yeah. He's the best.
I'm always like, do I want kids? Do I want kids? And then I'm like, no, I think I want a kid. Because
Yeah.
every time I speak to moms, they're like, no, it's the best. By the way, I've never heard a mom that said this is the worst thing ever. I haven't heard that yet,
Yeah.
but
I think it's okay. Like there's,
Yeah.
I think that like mom should also have the space. Like it's hard. Like it's a big challenge. Like it's hard to like, it's permanent.
yeah.
Like,
No, yeah,
you
it's a
can't tap out.
No, once you're there, you're there.
It's like this is your child for life.
I wonder how much of the culture, though, are you like showing him? How much is
so
he
much,
exposed to?
So much, yeah.
Yeah?
I mean, I try to only speak to him in Spanish, and then when
Nice.
you know he's with my family, he only speaks in Spanish. He has a Bad Bunny impression.
Ooh,
I'm gonna
we
send
gotta
it to
see
you after
that.
this.
We gotta see that.
And so I play him like a ton of the music, and like we're doing like little like pasitos, like to learn like salsa. Like he like stomps around.
He's ready.
So it's like a huge part of me too, and you know I want to take. I grew up going back and forth between the U.S. and Nicaragua. Nicaragua is a really complicated country right now, but I'm hoping that like I can take him and have that be a part of his life too. Like it's huge to me. So
I
yeah.
love that for you. I love that for you.
Thank
And I know you got to
you.
pick him up, so I'm like, I'm trying to like
No, you're
go
good.
through it, but I'm like, wait, I don't want to rush this. Hold on. I wanted to ask you the trends and the developments that you are seeing going on specifically in the digital world as it pertains to music. What are some of the impacts that you feel it will have globally on us? Like with some of the trends that you're seeing like behind the scene?
Yeah, I think some of them worry me a little
Really?
bit, to be honest. I think some of the
Like the
developments
AI
we've seen in
stuff?
AI, I
Yeah.
get really worried. I worry about the way that we're compensating songwriters. I worry about the way that we're compensating other musicians who've traditionally had like, you know, roles, you know, like in like bigger backup bands. Some of it is super interesting, and I think is gonna like, you know, I think that having more access to music at the end of the day is a good thing. And you know, I think so much about like I don't know, just like if you think about like different genres or different countries where like kids have like found like a laptop and like use that to like get their message across in a way that maybe traditionally they couldn't have before, and like all of a sudden like they're able to voice like their experiences, and you're seeing that in different parts of the world and in different parts of Latin America, where like, you know, maybe before to like, I don't know, because of how stodgy the Latin music industry has, maybe before like you needed to be like a trained musician, like a trumpet player from
Right.
like a richer country, and now it's like if you have a laptop and you have
You're
a
good to
mic
go.
and you can and you have something to say and you have a perspective, like I feel like it democratizes the world in a much healthier way, and like also makes us pay attention to different parts of the world too. Like I'm really excited by like different scenes that I see developing, and places that, you know, traditionally the Latin music industry hasn't really paid attention to. I think everything that is happening in the Dominican Republic is incredible. There's so many indie artists making like cool, great music. And I see
And they're
that
so ahead of their time, by the way.
yeah.
When I go to DR and PR, I'm like, something that comes out here, I'm like, I heard that already.
Yeah.
Like, I already heard that. Like, we're so advanced over there that just the music and everything, it's like, I don't know, I guess they feel it out first, see how it's going, and then
Yeah.
bring it over here. But
Well, I feel like they have such a connection too of like, you know, like there is something a little bit frustrating, right? About how like I think sometimes mainstream artists or like the industry is always paying attention to what's happening in the underground and like using that and picking at that for ideas.
Correct.
Because it gives them a cool factor, because it like makes them more interesting. And then you have people who think that like these big artists are the ones that like came up with this
Yeah.
idea. But really, if you like look at it, like
Yeah.
there's like these kids like in the underground who are doing it first. And I think the reason that it comes across so cool and so genuine is because like they don't have the pressures of the industry. They're not doing this for like capitalist means or to like
it's just for
sell.
them.
They're doing it because they feel it. And so
Yeah.
it's like a different thing of like they connect to it differently. And so I think that's also like it's a double-edged sword, right? Because like I feel like we need to be doing more to support that kind of art and the artists who aren't like tied to a label and like supporting our indie artists because they just have like a better like feeling of things sometimes.
It's like raw. It's very authentic. I would say it's like the
Exactly.
B-side of the tape, you
Yeah.
know? I know you spoke about J Noah, but who else do you have your eye on now?
Right now.
Like, who do you think is gonna like, if you had to give like your predictions here on Growing Up Latina? Yeah.
We did a big piece that I was really excited about a couple months back where we got sort of all the women in Puerto Rico who are making noise right now and put them all together in a spread. I think it's the longest spread that we've ever done sort of like with women in Latin music at Rolling Stone. And we had Piano Antiano, we had Young Miko, Right Now, Cheska, and Pau Pau. I think any of those five I would bet my money on. Pau Pau I think is so cool.
Yeah.
Like she has such a cool vibe. And it's like a little bit different, I think, than to what we've seen. I think in the Dominican Republic, like Angel Dior, I think he's like a freaking genius. I think he's gonna blow up. I think, yeah, and then I'm excited too for like this wave of kids making música mexicana. Like they're so young.
Yeah.
I was at Prospect Park the other day with my 2-year-old, and I saw this kid playing a 12-string guitar, and he had on his phone like a video. It was like Junior H or Yaritsusu Sensei or somebody, and he was like learning like how to play like in the park. Like it's a 12-string guitar.
Yeah,
like it's not. It's so
me?
hard.
Yeah.
And so I think there's like so many young artists, I think, who are really connecting with that. And I'm especially seeing it like in the US too, of like these like younger bands. I just saw this band called Los Aptos the other day at a club around here, where it's also like super young kids who are mixing like Mexican music and like alternative rock. And I think that fusion is going to keep like producing things that are like interesting and a little bit different.
What trends are you gonna see die down? Like, what do you think is gonna?
This one's controversial. You're trying to get me in trouble.
I'm not. I promise, I'm not.
I do think that there was like that big wave of like popetong, reggaeton pop. I feel like people are kind of itching for something new. I think like maybe the stuff that you saw. Oh, do I want to say names? I think maybe the stuff that you saw like artists like J Balvin doing, like that sort of like big pop, but it still kind of has like a little bit of a dembow beat. I think people are kind of like itching for like the other side of that and like wanting something else. I feel like there's like almost this like need to go back a little bit to like sort of old school reggaeton and like changing the beat up and making it a little less pop. But on that same token, I also see a lot of artists coming up who like really want to do more traditional pop and like who want to do more like sort of like, you know, like are inspired by like the 90s and like inspired by what's happening. Like I think
it's coming back.
It is. Do you know this girl Gale from Puerto Rico?
No, I'm not familiar.
She put out an album that's so much fun. It's like I think like Shakira posted about it on her IG stories, and we did a piece about her, and it's got that like there's like a couple songs that almost have this like 90s pop rock sound, and I feel like it's so cool to see somebody doing that in Spanish.
Check her out.
Yeah, I'll send it to you.
She's young.
She's super young. I want to say she's like 24 or something like that.
Love that.
From Puerto Rico and now living in Miami. So
love that.
There's a lot happening. I mean, that's the beauty of this job. Like you don't get tired of like just how many people are out there doing like amazing, creative, interesting things. The downside is that you're never going to be able to cover it all, but like the stories are there, and I think too to think about like how this reflects like not just who they are, but like where they come from and their experiences. Like that's the exciting part to me.
Who, I don't even know if you can say this, but I'm going to shoot my shot here. Who's going to have like the next cover that we can, maybe you could just drop like a letter or something.
I can't say. We're working on a cover right now. It is.
I'm like, I'm just going to shoot my shot here.
I'll say this. It's and it'll probably, it's a Latina artist who's had a very big year. And that's all I'll say about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like I want to drop names, but then I'm like, I don't know if you're going to be like, yeah, no. But you're going to tell me after. You'll let me know after.
I'll tell you after.
All right, let's do some rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. Tell me you're Latina without telling me you're Latina.
um, what do people typically say for this?
Everybody has a different answer. People have facial expressions. People just have one word.
I think because I'm from Nicaragua, I feel like mine is gallo pinto. It's
Okay.
like, do you know what gallo pinto
What
is?
is that?
It's like rice and beans, but for some
Oh.
reason we call it gallo pinto. Like,
Really?
yeah. But I feel
Okay.
like that's like the comfort food of like, that's just like what
I
I want
need
to
to
eat
try
on a
that.
bad day.
Yeah, I need to try it. Okay. What does it mean to you to be Latina?
I feel like it's like an endless like source of pride. Like it's like an endless like fountain, I feel like of pride and creativity and connection to roots that are way deep down and generations that came before.
Okay. What is this chapter of your life called?
Mm.
Ooh, I know.
I think this one's hard. Oliver, I think, because it's my son. Like this is like
Stop it. That's so
the Oliver
cute.
years.
That's so cute. Okay, I love that answer. What is something you would want to work on that you haven't already?
I really want to do a piece on like old school salsa legends. Like I feel like salsa is just a genre that's really important to me. I feel like we have like Eddie Palmieri. I feel like we have like so many artists that are getting up there in age. I want to make sure that people get their flowers before they pass so that it's not like always like an obituary and looking at them in the rear view. Like I want to make sure people know that like we love their contributions to music while they're still alive.
Dope. Okay, if you could have the Last Supper with 3 Latinos. I know. It could be anyone.
Okay.
Who would it be? Just 3.
Okay.
And what food are you eating, by the way? Because I really want
We're
to
eating
know.
gallo pinto.
Okay.
I would want to do Shakira is a big one for me. I'm like super inspired by her music. Shakira, Cardi, because I feel like she'd like bring the party.
All right, Cardi. We're going to bring the bandita there too. Yes.
And
You got Shakira, you got Cardi.
I know. I feel like now I need to keep them all in music.
Okay.
Let's bring Jay Noah into it. Let's bring somebody young and cool.
Yo, I'm so coming to that dinner. Okay, finish this sentence.
Okay.
Growing Up Latina is?
Difficult sometimes, but something that I would never change.
Thank you so much for coming on this
Thank
show.
you.
Julyssa
Thank you.
Lopez,
We did it.
everybody.
We did it
We
despite
did it.
all the
I know.
challenges.
Despite the obstacles, we did it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I
Oh,
hope
drop
that was
your
okay.
Instagram. Let everybody know.
It's Julyssa _Raquel. It's the same on Instagram and on X, whatever the
Yes.
F it's called.
Exactly. Thank you.
Thank you so much.